Mr. Chair, you are now live.
Sorry, I was having a pastry. My haircut's not doing me justice. Not that it ever.
You're live though. It's a live haircut.
I get that. I get that. Okay, we're live on YouTube. Thank you, Ms. Tierney, for that laughing at my comical relief. That's the least we can do. We are live. Let's go ahead and start this meeting off. I'll go ahead and share the agenda. All right, welcome everyone to the Planning Commission virtual public meeting Thursday, June 17th of 2021 at 7 p.m. Call this meeting to order. Tammy, can we get a roll call?
Mr. Sale,
Here.
Mr. Waldman,
Present.
Mr. Imes,
Here.
Ms. Butler,
Present.
Mr. Klein.
We do have quorum. Mr. Pline is out, and we will now look at our agenda. The agenda as displayed here. We'll give everybody 15 seconds or so to look that over.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of approving the agenda say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? None. Motion passes unanimously. Agenda is approved as written. Then we do have a work session at the bottom of that, I believe. And I want to ask staff, is everyone going to be here for that work session? Is it still going on? Because sometimes the last minute they do need to cancel. Staff, are we going to have the work session today?
I'm sorry that, no, there's no work session tonight.
Okay, that's okay, good to know. I was just a leftover from the last agenda, wasn't it?
Yes, sorry about that.
Thank you. All right, excellent. So we have even more time, which is wonderful. Okay, the approval of minutes. I will go ahead and bring up the minutes from the last meeting.
So Ben, I have one change,
Change for what? The minutes?
the minutes.
Okay, you can go ahead and start talking then. And
Okay.
thank you.
On page 2, item 2, ordinance 0921, that was continued from the May 20th meeting where I recused myself. So I continued to recuse myself at this meeting on June 3rd.
Yeah, I know you're a bit shell shocked with the recusal stuff, as am I. So yes, let's get it correct. So I'll scroll down to that on page 2, but first going through take a quick look. The June 3rd meeting. Okay, so where would you like to add, now that everybody's read that?
Yeah, I would like to make just an editorial comment here
Go ahead.
where it says Vice Chair Waldman moved to recommend approval of the ordinance to City Council with the additional recommendation, instead of as conditioned, change it to with the additional recommendation. Ms. Hook, did you get that?
I did. Thank
Thank
you.
you. And the other
Mhm.
thing, at the end of that, we may want to say that Chair Sale and Commissioner Butler abstained from the vote.
Thank you. That's what I was going to add.
Right. And let's see, in the next paragraph, Vice Chair
Well,
Waldman.
she wouldn't abstain from the vote because she's not even participating.
So you
So,
don't,
Okay.
Yeah, but I
Okay.
put her as recused and thanks for catching that, Diane.
so you don't need to say you abstained and you recused.
Okay.
When you're recused, you're fine. You're no longer
Yes.
voting. Got it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Move to recommend approval. This next paragraph. Same thing.
Yeah, you, and you sent
With
those
the
to me.
additional recommendation instead of
Right.
asking, okay?
You sent that to me earlier and I got those. Thank you.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you're fine. I appreciate you repeating it.
And another item passed 3-0. So there you go, with an abstention. I was there and I abstained. So we did have quorum, except I abstained, which is fine. I believe that's okay.
I hope it's okay. It's just legislative recommendations.
That's, I'm with you, yeah. Okay, Tammy, based on what he just mentioned and what I heard you already have, I think you're ready to, you have everything you need for the changes and you're clear. Is that correct, Tammy?
That is correct. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
And Diane, your concerns have been allayed.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
There's been a motion to approve the minutes as amended. I'll second that
second.
motion. Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. Minutes are approved. Moving on to the approval of findings for ordinance 0921, accessory dwelling unit. Open that up. Okay, I'm sharing the 0921 accessory dwelling units ordinance findings. Does this look correct, Mr. Beard, from what you said?
No, I prepared those.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Waldman.
Scroll down. Scroll down. Scroll down.
This is all the data we're showing the people
Yeah.
from
this
what's
is all
been
from the
provided
staff-
by staff.
Just from the staff report. All right, there we go. That's the
There we
only one
go.
that counts.
Oh. Sorry, I referenced Mr. Beard. I'm looking at his mug first and the pictures of the lineup for pictures. There you go.
I don't know.
Should
Here's
it,
my
should it be recommendations? Should it be recommendations or amendments
the recommendations to the
on
council.
after that paragraph?
Yeah, they're just recommendations. I actually, as I even look at this, I think that, and here's my observation, I think that we should really send to the council more information on the kinds of public comment we've got and what our thinking is on these things, rather than just these barefaced single sentences. I think we should deliver more about why we think the way we think, why we voted the way we voted. Because the council kind of looks to us for sort of a first line of vetting these issues. And if we come up with things that if we want to be respected for our recommendations, then I think that we ought to provide some background and support why we voted the way we did.
I would say this is not the most recent version. This is what I sent you as the draft. You did add quite a bit to the recommendations.
Oh, shoot. So I sent the wrong thing out?
No, that is correct what you sent, but it is not what is on the screen. Ben must have found the earlier version.
I am so sorry. Not only was I late tonight, but somehow I screwed this up. Dr. Nash, do you have the fuller version?
Yes,
Go ahead. I need to find it.
I can
You obviously
share
sent
it.
Can you share your screen, the screen, Sally?
I'm gonna stop
can.
share.
Or send it to Ben?
Okay.
I am so sorry, everybody.
Don't worry about that. No worries, man. We're overtasked.
Oh, God. No, I'm not. I'm undertasked. I'm losing my touch. I remember writing a lot more about why we decided the way we did.
Yeah, that totally looks like a shell.
Yeah.
Ben, if you could stop sharing, I could start sharing.
So start sharing.
Okay. Oh, Christ. Actually, I'm just going to send this to Julian. I accidentally closed Zoom. So, Julian, would you mind sharing this?
Yeah, for now.
Okay. I've just emailed it to you. Julian likes participating in the meeting.
Something's wrong.
Well, Ben's talking, but he's got no microphone on.
Probably better off. I was just letting members of the public know you can go to the Planning Commission website right now and download a lot of the stuff we're looking at right now in case you want it for your own files. So go to Google the Annapolis Planning Commission, and it'll bring you right to that page for the Planning Commission. It'll show a link, especially to the draft rules of procedure we're going to look at later on today and other things and agendas. Okay, do you have that file, guys, to go or no?
It's loading now. It'll open in 2 seconds. Hopefully.
Oh, I've lost it someplace. Oh.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Okay, I found it. Would you like me to send it again?
Oh, that's it. So he's scrolling. See at the analysis where you keep going, Julian.
All the way to the end. Now go back a little bit.
Yep. See, this is the section you've added.
Oh, wait a minute.
I don't see any difference.
Okay, good enough. What I would like is some feedback from my fellow commissioners. If I do this in the future, do you think it's a good idea to add more information? For instance, why do we think that owner-occupied homes can do
100%.
You know,
100%.
I mean,
I expect it to be in there already, to be honest with you.
I think, I mean, I would even add more to this if I had the chance. If you guys thought that.
Yeah. Well, I could see us adding more, like, for example, with the parking, why we thought the way we did instead of a blanket, you know, and the issues that we have with the way the parking's done as it is right now, even downtown, you know, that we didn't really talk about that. But
yeah, I mean, we did a good job with this legislation, and I think that somehow we need to communicate that. and I don't know quite how to go about it. And I also don't think that we should hold this up tonight. The council needs to get to act on it. Anybody have any ideas?
Yes, we can always show up at the council meeting.
Either that, or we could write a letter that gets distributed to the alder people that just hopefully doesn't go beyond one page, but expands a little bit on our findings. And I could write that and circulate that to you guys and see what you think. Is that acceptable?
Sounds good.
Okay. Okay. I will do that. Double work for myself. All right. Letter to council.
Wait, you're not very taxed right now, so that's good.
Okay, good. All right.
I abstained from voting on the item, but as far as the minutes are concerned, you're going to need, you'll have Diane's as abstaining, obviously, from the whole issue, recused herself. And I don't want to abstain again from your minutes because I understand what you did with the minutes and understand why they are for the vote. So I think I can vote on the minutes, but
You mean the finding?
I'm thinking you need a body for a vote. So, I mean, I can, the minutes, I have no problem with voting on the minutes.
Did
You mean the
you
findings?
involve yourself?
Yes, findings, correct.
Did you recuse yourself from the hearing on this issue?
I abstained on the vote. I did not recuse myself from the hearing. I just abstained on the vote because I wasn't there for the previous meeting's arguments on it, nor did I have time to review those at that time. But I'm fully aware of why you're making these findings and why you're doing what you're doing. I may not agree with everything in them, but I understand they're correct. The findings are correct. So I will vote upon them. Just to let you know.
Okay,
So the findings are matching what our thoughts were as a commission,
Absolutely.
is what you're saying.
Yeah, so, and even though I abstained from the vote on the item the second time, or when it was voted on, I can still vote on your minutes as an administrator.
on the findings, okay.
The findings,
Then I
sorry.
move to approve the findings as drafted.
I will second that.
Okay. All those, any other further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Diane Butler, I believe, she's recused herself from the
She's
item.
already recused.
She's already recused, so that's it. All right, the findings pass unanimously with Mr. Bob Waldman's comments put in there. We'll also,
And Ben, can I sign them for you?
absolutely, and we will also make note of in the future to continue to add the meat behind why we have the findings the way we are, not just to make us a quick summary, but to also give in the feedback from the public to help the city council have a good, quick read of what the general vibe was. Thank you, Mr. Waldman, and other commissioners did a great job on that. Okay, on to the next item. Got the findings completed. Any new business that we need to worry about before we go into the public hearings? So any new business anyone wants to mention that we need to handle? Okay, we'll move on to public hearings. The number one, the comprehensive plan annual report for public hearing is now continued from June 3rd, 2021. We will open the public hearings, continue to have them open, start hearing that. Staff, anything changed or added for the comprehensive plan annual report that you would need to rebrief to us or brief as new?
Nothing at all. It's a pretty straightforward short form because of the limited number of new permits in the last year. It
Gotcha.
came in under the, so.
And I received no comments from the public. Is that correct? Does that still stand?
No comments.
Okay. Hearing no comments from the general public, and also want to make doubly sure there's no one here today that wants to talk on the comprehensive plan annual report.
One signed up for live testimony.
No one has, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, thank you, Ms. Rouse. All right, hearing that no one's here and we also had no public comment, we will close the public comment portion of this hearing and on to commissioner debate and comments on the item. Commissioners, go ahead. Any comments? All right. Hearing none from my fellow commissioners at the moment, I also do not believe we need to further deliberate on the comprehensive plan annual report. Pretty straightforward, short form due to a COVID year, having a minimal amount of issues that we've heard. Do we have a motion for approval, comprehensive plan annual report?
So moved.
I'll second.
It is seconded. Any further deliberation? Hearing none, we'll take the vote. All those in favor of approving the comprehensive plan annual report recommendation, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? It's unanimous, passes. Thank you very much. Sally, is there anything else we need to do with this or staff?
Nope, that's it.
So
Okay.
if there is time and it's not on the agenda, I would like to make a brief comment on the comprehensive plan, if that's possible.
All right, we'll leave that down to miscellany at the bottom after public hearings, and we could do that.
Please let Eric talk so he can leave.
Oh, he needs to leave.
Oh, he doesn't need to stay. Let's put it that way.
I am happy to join
Eric?
whenever.
Eric, if you can depart, for efficiency, I have no problem with it. Does any other commissioner have a problem with that?
Not at all.
All right, Eric, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make another, oops, can't share my screen, so maybe this won't make any sense. I was gonna let folks know on the commission and those watching from home that we did release the draft goals, metrics, and recommendations for the comprehensive plan yesterday. They're on our Annapolis Ahead 2040 website. If you Google that, should be the first thing that comes up. I would encourage everyone to check that out and provide constructive comments. It's a good amount of material to look at, but it's a very straightforward online format that you can just kind of surf around, and everything is organized by the 8. See, I'm allowed to share my screen, so I'm just gonna very quickly go to our Annapolis Head 2040 website. In fact, if you're on the city's main page, there's a link at the bottom for comprehensive plan. It actually takes you to our comprehensive planning website. Click on the 2040 comprehensive plan. You'll get this update about where we are in the process. Encourage you to click on the draft goals, metrics, and then that's where you'll see the 8 elements of the comprehensive plan are on this sidebar here. We provide some background to the structure of the plan for those who may be coming at this for the first time. The case studies, as you might recall, are these 4 sites where we're looking to provide some direction based on the tenor of the comprehensive plan. So if you click on that, it takes you to this case study website where you can provide comment on these 4, what we see as critical sites. Clicking on any of them provides you with some basic info about the site we're talking about. Here it's the shopping center with the giant shopping giant grocery, and then there's a brief survey at the bottom that we encourage folks to take and give us some feedback on this site. You know, these are all sites that we see redeveloping the next 10, 20 years, and we think the comp plan should provide some direction to what would make sense on these sites. We're not going to be providing conclusive master plans or anything like that, but some guidance on what would make sense on those sites. And then if you just go back to the 8 elements, you can access them from the sidebar here. You could also scroll down and they're accessible here. If I click on land use, for example, takes you to a page where you can submit comments about the land use section, brief intro description, some of the more compelling exhibits that you've probably seen on past presentations with some new text to explain what you're looking at. And then the goals, you can kind of just toggle through the goals, and they provide metrics and the actions associated. And you know, we tried to clarify some of the more jargony terms. The actual comprehensive plan document that we hope to release in September would have a glossary. We don't have that here, but some of the questions we might get might be about terminology. So if you were to click on the submit your comments, you get a form that looks pretty similar to the one that folks would normally submit for a planning commission comment. You can fill in the goal that you're talking about and the comment you have, and this will come to us telling us you're talking about the land use element. And you can just basically surf around to any of these, and we're just looking for comments that can help us refine these goals and recommendations. In the actual plan document, we're going to be organizing them based on priority, short-term, mid-term, long-term. Well, we don't have that here yet, but we're just looking to refine the language. Are they aspirational enough? Are they actionable enough? What's missing? Etc. So this is going to be up until early August, so there's plenty of time to chime in and give us feedback, and we're going to be logging all the comments that we receive and keeping track of those in an organized fashion. So anyhow, that is where we are at. Thank you for allowing me to share that. I should say, you know, since we've been through COVID, everything is very much based on the website, recognizing that some folks may not be able to access that. If you if anybody listening or anybody on this commission or any of the council members know of constituents that would like to get something in printed form, we are more than happy to provide that. So.
Hey, Eric.
Yes.
Hi, this is Diane. Is there any plan at all to do one big meeting over at Pitt Moyer so people can see things on whiteboards and put Post-its on things they agree with or don't agree with? Will there be any public input in person at all?
It's a great question. We had not planned anything yet. I think we can certainly think about doing something like that. That might be appropriate since things are opening up, and I'll talk with Director Nash and my colleagues and see if that makes sense.
Okay, and then I want to thank you for putting the case studies up and make them so accessible. I really appreciate that. I think on the last call we weren't able to access them very easily. Yeah. But I just want to point out one more time. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but it's really super important that even though the Haka properties at Eastport Terrace Harbor House are going to apply for the Choice Neighborhood Grant program, it doesn't mean that they should be excluded from the type of guidance that you would expect to give in a comprehensive plan about the next 15 or 20 years of development. So it would be great to include it back in as as one of the case studies. I just feel like treating it separately completely is ignoring it, and it's such an important component of our city, and the redevelopment of that property is so significant that working on it with the folks that are working on the Choice Neighborhood Grant seems to make a lot of sense. So I know I've said that before, but I just ran into Melissa Maddox Evans recently, and we were talking about it, and I think she agreed it does make sense if they could work, if we could work together. The two are not mutually exclusive just because the Choice Neighborhood Grant program is being considered for that site.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. It gives that some thought. I think, I do want to clarify though that, even if we do not get the Choice Neighborhood Grant funding for that planning process, I mean, the intent of the city and of HACA is to do a community-based planning process there. And that is not something that we've identified for any of these other sites. So it does, it is sort of unique in that regard. And, there's a council resolution and there's clear direction on focusing on that site, from a redevelopment perspective. So we have a goal in our recommendation in the comprehensive plan about that, but I'll give that some thought. I see what you're saying and see if it makes sense.
What about Watergate?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly another one that I'm sure people are thinking about. I think we had to, I think there are clear recommendations regarding sites in the R3 and R4 districts. Watergate is one of those. We are going to be doing a dedicated form-based zoning plan. Essentially, I don't want to call it a study. We have one of our comprehensive planning consultants is going to be focusing specifically on zoning updates, and one of the questions is going to be how to preserve affordability in the city in sites like that. So that is going to be something we're going to be looking at in the near term as well. But
Okay.
to give it some thought.
All right. Okay.
Not enough? Any other questions from commissioners? All right, thanks, Eric. We'll get back to the public hearings for the draft rules of procedure.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night. Good night, Eric.
Okay, for the rules of procedure for the Planning Commission for the City of Annapolis, I am sharing you the actual signed 2013 rules to take a quick look. And there's about 10 pages of them. And these are readily available for anyone on our Planning Commission website through the City of Annapolis. Go ahead and scroll down. Members, chairpersons, we'll get quickly through that. Administrative duties, quickly through that. Where the changes are going to come are in section 6 for ethics, conflicts of interest, and ex parte communications. This is the existing procedure that we have. And underneath 6.2 is where we're going to see these changes come. And I'll show you the recommended change document here in a second. I just want to give everybody a chance to look at this. Okay, that should have given you time to roughly get through section 6 there. And I also want to go down to section 7 here for the quorum and voting. Please read that. And right here, Bob and Chris Beard, 7.3 is why I firmly believe that 3 was an okay vote at our last meeting for that item, because we did have 4 persons to conduct business, but then a majority of that quorum needed to vote on an item for it to pass, which was what we had. So we had 3 of the 4. So we didn't need 4 of 7. We just needed the majority of 4. That's my interpretation of the quorum and voting in 7.3. And if anybody believes otherwise, please let me know.
I agree with you, Ben. And if it had been like, we had to do it unanimously, because if it had been 2 out of the 3, it wouldn't have been a majority.
Correct.
I agree.
That
Look
was
at
the people voting.
7.2. Look at 7.2 though.
That's correct. 4 members of the planning commission shall constitute a quorum for the transaction of business. There were 4 of us here. We were conducting business. And then decisions on the item in 7.3 would need a majority of that quorum, which we
I
had.
see what you're saying. Yeah, which was 3.
There you go. Okay. All right. So now knowing any other comments from Chris or Bob or any other person of legal concern?
I agree with your interpretation.
Thank you. Okay, now the quorum and voting question I think has been answered. Any other last by the ways for quorum and voting? All right, we will scroll down to the rest of, just so you can see real quickly. Section 8, Section 9, public hearings. Anything referred to us, we'll go right down and get rid of that. And then minutes, on-site inspections and reconsideration, and work sessions, amendments, and finality to it. So there you go. And that was signed by wonderful Dr. Eleanor Harris. We do miss her. She gave a great educational insight into the planning commission. I hope she's doing well these days. Going back up to section 6, that's where we're going to see our concern. Section 6 is ethics, conflicts of interest, and ex parte communications. I'll now bring up the actual recommended changes we have and go from there. And notice we're not doing a staff presentation of this because this is from ourselves to change our own rules. I'm opening the file, just bear with me. Okay, this is the file that was actually displayed on the Planning Commission webpage from the City of Annapolis overall website. Been posted since our last meeting, and we will go over this tonight and then leave it open for public hearing consideration for the next 2 weeks till our July 1st meeting, where we will then hopefully be able to vote on it after final deliberations and public hearing. So what you're seeing here is the overall procedures for the Planning Commission. And we'll go ahead down to the changes where these are all existing. So what we saw before, this is it again. This is just an unsigned draft. Before you actually saw the 2013 signed ones. We'll get down to section 6, and you see here in bold,
So Ben, can I jump in while this is being read?
go right ahead.
So I just want to say that I consulted with our attorney, Chris Beard, on this, and we were looking at basically the idea is to have our language basically duplicate what the Board of Appeals language is, and it's really similar to what the Port Wardens has done too. So it's the most current approved language that other boards are moving towards, and they're a quasi-judicial board. So I think it makes sense. Chris did a little cleanup of the, not of the language, but just of the formatting, and reduced some redundancies. And he sent, or I sent around that recent version this afternoon. And I think you all have it. Chris, can you share your screen? I can't, I don't think I can do it on this computer.
I don't know that I can. Say you sent it, so another member do that.
Ben, do you have the email I sent at 1?
I do, and I have that email. That would be the third thing I would show to everyone, because the one that was presented to the public is the one we are showing right now. And now I can bring up your additional add-ons.
Right. Well, so it just straightens out, like it doesn't say F and G, it says A and B. And formatting is corrected. And
okay. Give me a second to bring that up. So again, you see section 6.1 and 2 there. Now I'm going to change that over to section 6.1 and 2 of the final draft that she sent today at about 1:27 p.m.
And thank you, Chris, for straightening out the format.
No problem.
And here we go. Do you see it?
Not yet.
You see it?
Yep.
Yep.
That's it.
And I would add, this is consistent with the Board of Appeals, which has Article 3 for conduct, and E, F, and G under that Article 3 is, this is consistent with E, F, and G of the Board of Appeals, what you're looking at now. And there are some deletions, so to remove repetitive provisions and allow it to be consistent with itself and also with the Board of Appeals.
One quick editorial change. A, end of the fourth sentence, way over on the right, change board to commission.
Thank you. Yeah, I actually did this with find and replace, and I would take out board and put commission. So I'm surprised I missed that.
So there's a difference between these two.
Yes.
One of them, the conflict of interest. The commissioner makes a decision one way or the other if they want to proceed or recuse themselves. But that decision can be overridden by a majority of the, change that once again, commission, a majority, see A?
Yep, there's a couple of places.
It's actually the same sentence. So you change that, a majority of the commission can override an individual's decision. But in the matter of ex parte communications, it's totally up to the commissioner and not in any way, it's not over, the body as a whole can't override that individual decision. Is that right?
That's right. And the way I've read about it and the way I understand it from talking to the Board of Appeals is that a communication is something that once you fully disclose and tell everyone the same information that you've received, then you all share the same basis upon which to make the decision. And if you feel like you can be impartial and fair at that point and still participate, there is no override necessity. Conflicts is a little more difficult because the board should have an opportunity, or commission should have an opportunity to override. So for instance, if my husband is a developer and I say, I really want to vote on this, you guys can say, no way, it's a conflict, and we don't care if you don't think it's a conflict, we do. So they deem conflicts to be a little more, it's more important to have an override option for the commission than just important information that was maybe miscommunicated or communicated to one person and not the entire commission. Once the person shares it with the entire commission, it's kind of like
Okay.
making it whole.
I get the thinking behind that. I think that makes sense. I would point out though, in an incredibly mischievous kind of frame of mind, that if an applicant, say, does something pretty egregious, in terms of trying to talk to a commissioner, the commissioner brings it to the board as a whole, and following the thinking that you just pointed out, then the commission as a whole has access to what that applicant or other person has tried to, information and the argument that they have.
Right.
So everybody is poisoned to the equal extent. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right.
So then in that case, if everybody felt like, having heard this, having been poisoned, that they cannot make the decision in a fair and impartial manner, they could simply, everybody could recuse themselves, and then there would be no way of proceeding upon that application.
Yeah, I think that's right. So that's one way, it's a deterrent for the applicant to try to influence somebody.
But is that really, could you really say you've been poisoned? Because if an applicant, what he wants one commissioner to know, everybody knows, it's no different than if he said it at a public hearing or a presentation. So we all know that information. I don't think us knowing any information is a bad thing, as long as we all know the same information.
Exactly. As long as we all know the same information, that's the key here. So I don't know if you.
I mean, I could imagine, I could let my imagination go. I could see a situation which is so egregious. The statement made, the threats made, the bribery offers made to one individual made common to everybody. Everybody could feel that they've been compromised in some way, and that the entire commission recuses itself, and there'll be no more action on that application.
In that case, there would be a penalty of 6 months at least, or other penalties for that, which is listed in our procedures later on. I see what you're saying.
Unring the bell, Anyway, it's an interesting one. It's not important to discuss it now. But maybe in my future life, when I advise developers, we might come up with something like that.
Oh, look at you selling yourself. All right. Yeah.
Well, thank you for your input.
All right. I think first I want to thank the Board of Appeals. I want to thank Diane Butler, and I want to thank Chris Beard for having clarified all this, put it into good shape. I think that it's time to have done this good work on this topic. Although I kind of recall that we opened a public hearing at the last meeting and made all of this information available on the website in order to be able to take a vote on it tonight. Is my recollection correct?
I thought so, but
I see what you're trying to do, but you don't have to. We've brought up this item for change under the existing rules of procedure, and I believe the city council legislature, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Beard and anybody else here, but the new procedure for changing commissioner board procedure wouldn't apply to us, because our next meeting would be on July 1st. And also we had started this whole procedure under existing rules of procedure of change. So we're kind of grandfathered into that while we're proceeding through. To change our procedure of how we're doing something halfway through doesn't seem to make sense to me. Does anybody else have any say so on that? Or comment?
I just have a question, Ben. Is this the version that we posted on the city website, or have you changed it again?
Go.
Clean
You had
ending.
previously sent me an amended version that you said was the version that we were publicizing. Is it?
This slight amendment is different, but it's very slight changes. It's more.
Well,
of
if
a-
someone could send it to me, I will have to post the amended version on the city website.
We can do that to you, but I don't believe the changes are such that it changes really the gist of what we want to do. It's just-
Okay, we just need to get the correct version up there.
Okay, and we will change board to commission in the text.
Someone could just email it to me at some point when it's ready to, when you finalized your changes, we can post it with have it posted so that the public can read it and provide comment. That it's already posted that way.
I believe that's safe, and also I believe on July 1st, when we have the meeting again, this will probably fly through with no problem under the existing process that we're using to change our rules of procedure. Does anyone have a comment on that? We also have some council members here. I mean, you can also chime in if you'd like on this issue, because you guys just passed that article change. Mr. Arnett, Ms. Tierney, anyone else? Mr. Arnett can't hear you.
Yeah, I'm trying to unmute myself.
Gotcha.
I think you have it right. The council actually doesn't approve these. The council has 30 days to comment. And the only remedy if the council doesn't like what you're doing is for the council to pass changes to the code that would prohibit you from doing something. I think that is so unlikely as to really not be a consideration, particularly for the boards and commissions, maybe for some of the rulemaking at, say, Public Works or Planning and Zoning or some other place. There may be something maybe having to do with environment. But for boards and commissions, I think it would be very unlikely.
Okay, and the new legislation procedure, I'm sorry, the new code procedure takes effect on what date?
June 29th.
June 29th. Being the fact that we already started our process of changing before that, and we're under a different code process right now, I want a legal opinion on this. If we started to proceed right now through the existing process, do we have to change our process halfway through since the code changes, or do we continue? Which is the correct way to do it?
Why don't you vote tonight, and I'll circulate this tomorrow, and it'll be signed based on that vote, which is tonight.
That's not an answer.
But this is, we did mention it last meeting and did put it out there for public review for 2 weeks plus. So, and did we receive, and now we're opening up, let's go, I think the presentation, we'll call it over, opening up for public comment. And we've got some comment already from the council members. Is there any other comment that we received from the public via the website staff?
We have not received any comments.
Okay. We have posted this last week, 2 weeks prior. Now the public has been presented to it. They've had 2 weeks to review it. Now, if we go ahead and try to vote on it tonight, we are going to, I think we're going against our 2 week time frame of giving the public the chance to comment again, but we did brief it last meeting. So that's a bit of a, what do you think?
Did we open the public hearing last week, or did we open it up today?
No,
Did you-
last
I
week.
mean,
Last week.
we opened it
Last
up
meeting.
for the public.
Last meeting.
Okay, I didn't know if we actually had people speak, if we opened it for people to speak last week. Okay.
It was open.
It was not on the
So this
agenda
would be
for the last meeting. It wasn't on the agenda for the last meeting, so you couldn't have opened a public hearing at the last meeting because
Yeah.
it wasn't on an agenda.
That is correct in my mind. So we did not open it last week, but we barely squeezed it under the wire to get it in the 2 week prior notification that we have to have, or notification time that we have to have for the item to be displayed to the public, which was totally okay by our rules of procedure. If you go and look for the timeline, if we accept it to be slightly less than that, that's fine. As far as actually going under the new rules of procedure on the 29th or not, I believe we're grandfathered in by the old rules of procedure because we started with that. We've been proceeding with it already on this for, we're going to be doing it for 2 weeks. I need a legal opinion on if we're grandfathered under the old procedure since we've begun it under that, or we have to switch to the new procedure, which really isn't all that tough to do.
Well, are you leaving the hearing open until the next meeting? Is that what you've decided?
No, we've not decided yet, Ms.
We're
Rouse.
asking Chris Beard to tell
Oh,
us.
okay. I'm just having trouble following what you're doing.
So,
No,
Mr. Beard,
you're getting into the middle of it, please.
so Mr. Beard, do you have a legal opinion on it? Do we follow the old process because we've already started that? Or
Yeah, you
when it-
do. You follow the old process and continue on.
Okay, so we will, so in my opinion, from what I'm getting from legal and the way we do things and most rules of procedure, things we do around the city mostly when it deals to code change, is we follow the procedure that we've begun the process change in and complete it in that procedure, even though on the last 2 or 3 days of this procedure, the article changes, because you don't want to be changing everybody the way they do business. So that makes total sense. So in my recommendation, the rest of the commission, and I want your feedback, is that we leave this public hearing open on the item as we've chosen to amend it, I believe. We post that on the website, and when we come back July 1st, we vote on it, and we can process it through under our old procedure that we are currently in.
I agree. I think that sounds right, and I think your analysis is right. We did talk about it at the last meeting, but it was under miscellany. It wasn't on the agenda, which means really the public didn't have it, the amount of notice I think it would need to vote on it today. So I think your analysis of doing it 2 weeks from now, when the public does have another 2 weeks to look at it, makes great sense.
Thank you. And I will also add that the public gets a lot more notice under our current procedures of 2 meetings in a row than they used to in the past. So, okay, so we have no public comments from submittal. We had a comment from Mr. Arnett. Appreciate that. Any other alderpersons or other people that happen to be online right now want to make a comment?
Well, just a general comment that I'm a little confused on the objective of this, but I know, I think we've already had that discussion. Because if it goes to council for comment and we don't comment, then what is the process for?
I think, Ms. Tierney, I think it's just to kind of clean up a hole in our rules. Our rules were not very clear or specific. And the Board of Appeals had gone forward and changed their rules and made them clarified them and made them more specific. And I think that this is simply following up that. I don't think that it's a major, they're not major changes, that they just give us sort of a map as to how to get through some of these issues.
More detail where we didn't have it.
Yeah, it's just, it adds, I think it adds a useful element to our rules.
For you, I don't feel comfortable commenting on them. I think they're yours, but that's just my opinion.
Well, you may be commenting on them, as a council, as a citizen, you can comment on them. Do they make sense? Are they unwieldy? Do they cover the situations well?
Mm-hmm.
That's what we, if that kind of feedback is useful.
Okay, yeah, as long as it's productive. Yeah.
Okay, what do you think?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I mean, yeah.
Now.
If it works for you, I think that's the objective.
And you've got 2 more weeks to take a quick look at it if you want, and just compare section 6 in this to our signed ones. And you can get both of those from our planning commission webpage, or I can just email them to you directly, just the page to make it real easy for you to compare. So in essence, under the new rules that'll come in July, the city council will get a mandatory 30-day period of review and some other things in there, which are fantastic. But you also still get to review this under the old procedures anyway, as being council members that can see anything and comment on it regardless. And you will have another 2 weeks to do so. So you kind of get the same with both processes just because of our COVID process of 2 meetings, which is nice. And I think
Ben, can I make a slight correction?
Absolutely.
The council has 30 days to look at this. They can make comments or they can make legislative changes, but we are not the approving authority for rules. That's not how I drafted the legislation. And really, as I said before, this is meant for other circumstances, but it's written so that it does capture you that in that net. But we're not an approving authority. The only option we have, if we, besides obviously having courtesy commentary with you like we're doing right now, the only option we have if there's something that we think is problematic would be to change the code and thus require you to change your rule.
Okay, then I did misunderstand,
Yeah,
Ross.
we are not an approving authority.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Alderman Arnett, for that more detailed professional explanation. Awesome. Does anybody else have any questions or comments at the moment on the item before we continue this public hearing to the next meeting?
And I'm happy to share the 3 changes you made tonight and send it over to Jackie. She wanted a copy.
Please do, Mr. Beard. That would be fantastic. And that includes changing the board to commission.
Right.
Awesome.
All right, we'll do.
Okay. And for clarity, we'll proceed under the current code and rules of how we're going to process this as a process change or rule change for our planning commission. And our next meeting on July 1st will be where we continue this till. And the public hearing is open. Any members of the public, please feel free to go to the Planning Commission website to download the draft change to the procedure for the Planning Commission, as well as the original signed 2013 one, so you can see the difference. In section 6 is where you'd see those changes. Any last minute comments from the commissioners? Okay, consider this item continued till our next meeting. I will stop the share. Thank you, Ms. Butler and Mr. Beard and other commissioners for their inputs on this item.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We try to get back to the agenda. All right, next on public hearings, we've gone through one comprehensive plan annual report. We've gone through draft rules of procedure. Next is ordinance O-1921 development application procedures for the purpose of providing for community benefit input and review of proposed development applications. This is the first time we're hearing O-1921 for the public hearing tonight, and it will be continued to July 1st. Is the staff have a proposal or a briefing they would like to give on the item?
Yes, good evening. This is ordinance O-1921 and also known as zoning text amendment 2021-009. And all of the information for that is on Trackit under that project number. The title of this ordinance is Development Application Procedures for the purposes of providing for community benefit input in the review of proposed development applications. And it's not a lengthy ordinance. What it does is add new language in our notification procedures. When we have a project come in for major site design or plan development, there's certain things a developer has to do. They have to have a pre-application meeting with the director to go over any red flag zoning code issues, building code issues that might be part of, that might come up. And then the developer is supposed to take the concept he or she has and have a community meeting where they go out to the community and get feedback from the community. After that community meeting now, they can submit their application. This proposes an intermediary step in between the community meeting and the submission of the application. And it offers within 30 days of the completion of the required community meeting, the alderperson for each ward in which the development is proposed can convene a diverse committee of residents and business representatives to meet with the applicant to review the project plans and identify specific community benefits. If a meeting is convened, a written report shall be submitted by the committee to planning and zoning. So that is the gist of the ordinance that was proposed by Alderman Arnett, and that concludes my staff report.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Nash. Are there any questions at the moment from the planning commissioners or anything to display, Dr. Nash, other than?
Dr. Nash, so when the alderperson has 30 days from the date of after the date of the required community meeting to call for this convening of handpicked citizens, is that right? 30
That's
days.
correct.
And yet there's no deadline to complete that process. In other words, that their meeting has to be held, the report has to be issued within another 30 days, for instance. Otherwise, this could drag on for months.
That is not addressed in the ordinance.
I got it. Okay.
I am unclear as to what would happen if a committee is convened, but no report is ever submitted to planning and zoning. I would say if we got a submission, we would begin reviewing it. It would not hold up our review of a submission, the way I read the code.
So the way you read this legislation in the code is that there's the currently required meeting. You know, the application is in your hands, you're reviewing it. And whether or not the alderperson, you know, creates this convention, you're going to continue doing what you're doing. It doesn't delay or suspend your analysis of the application.
That's my understanding of the proposed language.
Okay. And does the language of this legislation require the applicant to engage with the alderperson and his committee? Does it
Not
require?
in my understanding of the proposed language.
Okay.
Although it does say convene a diverse committee to meet with the applicant. So what would happen if the applicant wasn't interested in meeting? I would think that would not be a wise move on the applicant's part, but I don't think it would be required.
Yes, it's not required by the legislation.
By the legislation.
In the timeline for when they convene this community meeting, is there a timeline they have to have their input in?
No, it's just what I just asked, and there is.
Yeah. Sorry, I was trying to move files around. I had a feeling you just asked that question. So if we don't have one, what would we recommend?
Is maybe Alderman Arnett can give us his view on that.
And well, since we just had the staff report and the questions, Mr. Arnett is part of the, this is his, so go right ahead. We don't need to be in public hearing to have comments.
Thank you. I think Dr. Nash has it correct. This is a continuation of this notion of making sure that the community is aware that there's a big development project, and that's taken care of earlier in this section B. What this suggests is that the alderperson, and it doesn't have, it is at the discretion of the alderperson, and it doesn't have to be for every project. As Dr. Nash pointed out when we were deliberating on this, some projects are classified as major site design, but they're not really that big or that controversial. So it's in the judgment of the alderperson. The alderperson convenes a committee of persons to meet with the developer. If the developer should choose not to meet, the report from the community and the alderperson will be that the developer did not choose to meet with us. I think Dr. Nash is correct that probably doesn't indicate that we're getting off on a good foot. But what it does do, and I'm assuming that the developers will do, and in fact, I think in every one of the major site designs in my ward, the developers have and have bent over backwards to meet with the community. It gives the community and the developer early on to identify issues that are of concern and early on to come up with some things that are acceptable accommodations. So I'll give a specific example. Suppose there's a part of the adequate public facilities that cannot be met. This could be a preliminary beginning to a mitigation. And I would think everyone would be happy, the developer and the community, if they could say, okay, you can't do this about that stormwater situation, but instead you'll do that. And so the report would be that the committee met with the developer. They recognized several issues. One of them was an adequate public facility issue that can't really be met. And the sense of the community is a sufficient mitigation would be such and such. I think most developers would love to then go through the process armed with that kind of thing. They would have an identified community group. They would have identified community representative. They would have identified issues that were of concern, and they might not, but they could come up with accommodations that are acceptable. Even before the process starts, even before the staff goes through the normal process of adjudicating the application to make sure it meets all the codes and requirements. So that's the overall intent. This was brought to me by the Annapolis and Annapolis Neck Citizens Coalition. It's a group that is forming principally within the city. It's the Eastport Civic Association and the Greater Parole Community Association. And then outside in the Neck area, there's a couple of other groups. And they're looking at development in the area, the whole Neck area. And this was something they brought before me, and I submitted it, and here we have it.
Thank you, Alderman Arnett.
I would just say one more thing in thinking about it. I think that it is likely that there could be an initial report, and then there could be, at their mutual discretion, continued dialogue between the developer and the community group. And they may come back and what we're really looking for here is to form as much as possible a rapport. And so suppose the developer finds out they can't reach some height limit or something like that. And so they need to change their plans. It may be in their interest, and it certainly I think would be in the community's interest to have another dialogue. So this doesn't close that off. And I think that's why this is, and maybe Mr. Waldman, this is uncomfortable. This is almost by intent to allow for flexibility and not really nail down. It is not intended to hold up. It will hold up the application for 30 days, the time period where the alderperson has an opportunity. But it's not meant to hold it up. I will tell you that two of my colleagues, Alderman Gay and Alderman Savage, discussed that with me and said they weren't interested in delaying the process through, some protracted thing. And so this does not. There's 30 days, form a group, come in with a report whenever that report is ready. Meantime, continue to process, as Dr. Nash says, continue to process the claim, the application.
So I just have a question. It doesn't really change what basically already happens, at least in our ward, Ward 8. The developer comes in and they have a series of meetings. Some of them sound more like marketing meetings, but they sit down with the residents and we give them feedback. And a lot of that feedback is exactly what you're talking about. And then they promise that all along. And then when it comes time to actually doing it, sometimes that doesn't happen. So I'm wondering how this would change that, because the citizens can give their input and the developers can agree. And even if it's reduced to a condition in the findings of an approval, it doesn't necessarily make a difference. I'm just trying to figure out what is the benefit of this.
This does not bind anybody legally. It initiates, and after the sales pitch, it initiates a second dialogue where a specified manageable group of people, and by the way, it's not just citizens, it could be other businesses, sit down and have a dialogue with the developer. They can have as many meetings as they want, and they can talk about whatever they want. And the committee, as formed by the alderperson, will report the results of those discussions. They could be very cordial, very detailed, very successful. They could be very terse and brief, and indicate there's not a meeting of the minds. But this just offers that opportunity for a smaller dialogue group to have more or less one-on-one or maybe 7-on-1 kinds of discussions with the developer. And it's an opportunity for the committee in an organized way to set forth issues of concern and to hear ways that those situations could be potentially satisfied. It's a lot like when we were talking about the stream bed scouring for the Eastport Shopping Center. That never was a final agreement, mainly because the city, the Public Works Department didn't want to go off premise, but those kinds of things were discussed. And it really is meant to generate a dialogue, hopefully a productive dialogue, but it's not meant to hold up the process. It's not meant to deliver anything that is a legally binding document. It will be the description of the committee meeting will be the description of the committee, not the developer or the applicant. And it'll be taken as such, and it would be presumably part of any public hearing that goes down the road. So it's just one more opportunity to get together.
And I applaud that idea. I do think it makes sense. I just wonder if maybe the report that is drafted after those meetings are complete can somehow follow along in the review process as an attachment to the application, because it could easily get lost in the development review process. So let's say at some point it comes before us, we'd love to be able to see, or I should speak for myself, I'd love to be able to see the report that was generated by the citizens by the time it gets to us, whether it's being, considered or not.
My assumption is that the report would be submitted in Trackit like any other commentary.
Okay, so it's just another public comment that would be tracked that way.
Dr. Nash, it doesn't say it here that it would have to be submitted to the Planning Commission as part of the public comment. I mean, we assume that. Do we need to spell that out, or is this something that obviously would be provided to us?
Well, it says a written report shall be submitted, so we would accept it as
to planning and
public comment.
zoning. So, I mean, it doesn't say Planning Commission, but I would assume, and we're going to know about it, so we're going to ask. So I would think.
Oh, it would be part of our, it would be part of what we forward to the Planning Commission.
Or the e-Trackit record, one would think.
Yes, and it would be on e-Trackit.
Okay. Also, a timeline so if they have 30 days to convene a meeting, then I would think we'd want to have at least another 30 or 45 days to have those comments submitted, because working with the Annapolis NAC and Eastport Civic, things like that, and some other, it takes time to get those comments together. They have to meet again to go over their comments. So at least I would think we'd want to put in a 30 days requirement, at least, to give them time to provide their comments. Does anybody
actually, that's really not the intention. The intention is there's 30 days basically to give notice that we want to meet, After 30 days, the application is released to be processed, whether the group gets together or not. And I would really urge you not add more time to the processing of the application. That was a concern, particularly of Alderman Gay, but also the other alderpersons. This is not met. And Dr. Nash actually spoke to this when we're having meetings with the Office of Law. This is not something we want to see stopping the processing of the application. And
Okay.
in fact, I think the staff, I mean, Dr. Nash, you can speak to this better than I, but I mean, there is this 30-day period where the alderperson can get a group together. And after, my sense is after 30 days, the application can go in, because this meeting with the developer is a side process that may or may not produce results. It has no legal standing. It's just a sense of the community raising issues, just like if they were submitting comments on a project to track it right now.
Okay. So
I don't
again,
see
so
that
Dave,
we would have to wait 30 days. I think after, as soon as the community meeting is done, we can accept an application. But
Right.
I think it would be in the applicant's interest to wait if there were going to be this kind of committee to submit until after they've met with the committee.
Okay.
But I don't think that there would be prohibited from submitting something.
Gotcha.
The
So
only-
I get it. It's happening in parallel now. I get it. It's happening in parallel. And obviously with an application being submitted, there's going to be many months, most likely, between when they've convened that meeting to when they could provide input anyway. And logically, the time already exists, so you don't need to specify it out.
A lot of times after the community meeting, they do make some changes to their plan. So it's often is 30 days or so after the community meeting as to when we get a submission. The only timeline in the code, that point, is that if they wait longer than a year after the community meeting, they have to hold another community meeting. So I think they could submit.
So, and if you had a community meeting and then they submit their application, and then the community meeting comes up with their comments 2 months later or a month later, but the application's already been submitted, the application could still be changed and amended to accommodate any recommendations, right? From that community meeting, or is it too late by that point?
Right.
Yes.
Okay, well then I'm comfortable with it. Anyone else?
Ross, or Alderman Arnett, I have just a quick question. So I thought the idea was to talk about community benefits, and you're couching it a little bit differently in my mind. You're talking about the discussion of mitigating factors. So if a project comes in and doesn't meet adequate public facilities, instead of just sending it back, or is that still an option, saying you don't meet adequate public facilities right now and the application would get rejected? Is that still what happens? Can happen?
That's part of the normal process. As Dr. Nash described it, they'll have the community meeting as required, which, as you point out, is quite often a long sales pitch with little time for community input. They submit their application. The alderperson will form a committee, request a meeting with the developer. I would suspect that the developer will want to have that meeting, but the developer is totally free. There's no compliance here that requires the developer to meet with the community. I'd say that's a bad start for the project, but there's no requirement. But if the developer meets, issues are brought up, concerns are brought up, and ways to address it are brought up and agreed to, we have the ideal outcome.
But it's
if
not,
they're not agreed to, that's also an outcome. It's just means there's more things to happen ahead.
So when I think of community benefits, I think of something that's not already mandatory. So let's say you're building a project someplace where water access, for instance, isn't mandatory, but you think you'd really like to offer that benefit. That's a community benefit. It really has nothing to do with the adequate public facility that would be mitigating against. If
You're right, that adequate public facilities was probably a red herring or misleading. It could be a whole wide range of things, but say, for example, recreational space, we know that was an issue with the shopping center. There could be things done in lieu of, including, for example, saying, gee, we'd really like a floating dock at the end of the street by your development. Would you be willing to do that? And we would consider that a swap for having, a playground on the thing. And I mean, this is all very open-ended, and there's nothing that really requires anybody to do anything. It's just an additional option or opportunity for dialogue to be going on between the community and the developer early in the process.
Right. That's interesting. I think we do that already now, at least in our ward. So I don't understand the difference, but maybe there is. I think we talk about community benefits all the time and get them, in the dialogue early on, and from even before the filing of the application. So you're saying this is just going to formalize that process.
Exactly. And you're right. Alderwoman Rhonda Pindle Charles also does this much more intensively in Ward 3 than we do in Ward 8. So yes, this formalizes an opportunity for further dialogue.
Okay,
To be clear with the legalese there, this does not require the developer to actually attend that meeting. Okay.
So Mr. Arnett, maybe it would be a little clearer if it read, the committee is convened to review the project plans and identify specific community benefits and consequences.
Yep. And another word is concerns or issues.
Concerns, right, issues,
So
something. I think
that's why legislation comes to you guys. You add the fine tuning to it or major tuning to it.
Okay, well, I think right. It's a little bit misleading in fact, it sounds like it is misleading that you can only talk about community benefits and not community concerns, issues, and consequences. The other thing,
impact or lack thereof.
Yeah, right. The other thing is who writes the report, and the problem is that this could really get hung up for a long while, and without any real movement or progress, and it could be used as a delaying tactic. And so that's why maybe there should be some sort of sunset to each one of these convenings.
Actually, I don't think, and again, I think Dr. Nash spoke to this. It's not going to hold up the processing of the application by the planning staff. They'll go through all of the things they do. It'll be sent to every other department for all of the things that they certify. If it's bogged down and it's because the citizens didn't get the report in, that's their problem. And who actually would write it? As alderperson, I would think that I would select a group of people that I think are going to be pertinent to the particular issue, the particular neighborhood. I would ask someone to be chair of that group, and I would ask that chair to give the report to me and to be passed on simultaneously to the planning staff through the regular track it process.
Well, okay. I mean, if I take the perspective of an applicant, I want to know who's going to write the report, and I know that there'll be plenty of opportunities for me to complain that the report is skewed or unbalanced. But, as Stalin said, who writes history owns the history. So who writes the report is a kind of an interesting one. I do think that it should be, the third thing is, I do think that it should be stated that the report should become a part of the evidentiary record before the Planning Commission.
Fine with me. I'll tell you exactly what happened with this legislation. There were longer versions, there were more complicated versions, there were versions that the applicant and the community would sign off on the report together. And basically what the coalition said is, let's put in something that is very short and sweet. Don't complicate it. I think a couple of the things you suggested, Bob, in terms of not just having it be community benefits, but concerns or whatever issues, I think is an improvement. And I know already that the coalition wanted to add specific issues and community benefits to this piece of legislation right at the end of line 14. So what you say is consistent with what they've already said to me after this particular draft was posted. So I think you're in line with their thinking.
But you reject the notion of making more specific who's to write the report, when it's to be done, and so leaving it flexible is the way to let this happen.
I really don't know how to answer you. I like flexibility, but we're sending it to the Planning Commission because we want to know what you think. And if you think that's an improvement and Dr. Nash and the staff agree, that's what you're going to recommend.
Okay. I don't know what I think yet. Okay. That's good. Thanks. Who's the coalition, by the way?
As I said earlier, it's a group of civic associations, both within the city and on the neck. Lily Openshaw, she's the representative from Hillsmere. Rhonda Pindle, Charles, and I are advisory to the coalition, but it's mainly the Eastport Civic Association and the Greater Parole Community Association. I think there have been overtures to Murray Hill and WARA and some of the other associations, but we're the two biggest active community associations, so that's where it started.
Okay. So people from outside the city could be on this committee?
If the alderman chooses it. I mean, like, for example, I could consider Lily because of her experience as a traffic engineer. So she might be somebody who's not in the ward. It's not specific. I think the intent is that it be a small, manageable group of people. Otherwise it can bog down. But that's really up to the group for the project when it's formed.
How about it saying something like a diverse committee of no more than 7?
Fine.
Do you follow me? In order to keep it small?
Yep.
I mean, if that's your goal.
I think
you're muted.
I agree. I don't know what the right number is, but I don't want too many people. It's too hard to manage. It's too hard to schedule. And I think it would be overwhelming for the applicant. I'm sure the applicant will have an architect and a couple of other people. They can have whoever they want to pay to be in this meeting. But I think keeping it to a manageable size is ideal. And if you want to suggest amendment to make it 7, that's fine with me.
This is something the public could have done this even without this legislation. So currently today, anybody could set up a meeting, representatives to go talk to the applicant or not and draft something up for planning and zoning. There's nothing limiting people to doing that, but this would now limit them to within 30 days rather than being able to do it a month or 2 or 3 later. So it's almost like they're creating legislation that limits their already right to do something.
I don't agree, Ben, but I take your point. So this is the alderperson convening. Anybody else can make a comment, and any other group of people can make a comment, just like they can do now. So this is just simply trying to get a situation established where the alderman picks or alderpersons, if it spans 2 wards, pick a representative group to have a dialogue. Any other group is not precluded from having their dialogue, that whoever the developer is willing to entertain.
Okay. I still think, though, that it's something the alderperson could have done anyway without this, but it further puts it out there. Okay.
And it's funny, I kind of had the same reaction when I first read it. I thought, we already do this. This is part of our process. Now, is if it's outside of the 30 days, will people feel constrained, like they missed that period? I hope not.
The only person who misses the 30 days would be the alderperson.
Right. But they still could, you could 60 days after this process starts, you know, sit down. It doesn't keep anyone from sitting down with the developer at any point to discuss concerns and issues.
Right. But it would limit the alderperson to having 30 days. Okay. It's a limiting piece of legislation. Got it. Okay, I have no further questions at the moment. Anyone else?
Would projects, could some of the projects under the purview of this go to the Board of Appeals rather than the Planning Commission?
It's major site design under current code. The only time.
Okay.
No, I think I
No,
don't think.
they all go to Planning Commission for
Okay.
your review.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay, because it's, okay, I hear, it's in the code section under major site designs. Gotcha.
And plan developments.
And plan developments, very good. Thank you. All right. Okay, I have no further questions. Thank you, Mr. Arnett. You've been very clear, helpful.
You're welcome.
Any other commissioners with questions? Sally and Mr. Arnett, thank you for the presentation. The public hearing is open from now until July 1st, our next meeting, for any member of the public to submit through our website portal any comments, or to come in and actually present online at the next meeting about this legislation.
Mr. Sale, I believe, Julian, is there still someone who was going to comment tonight?
Bill Reichert was trying to get in, but he has not been able to make a connection. I think he is
He's
watching this. He's sending an email.
He is here, according to Julian, Alderman Arnett.
Fine.
Would you like me to bring it forward?
Yeah, Mr. Reichert, please let him in to talk on this matter, because we can receive public presentation comment.
All right. Mr. Ricker, are you there?
Bill Reichert was trying to get in, but he has not been able to make a connection. I think he.
I'm here if I can.
Watching
Yeah.
this.
Mr. Reichert, thank you. I can hear you just fine.
Anybody hear me? I mean,
Mr. Reichert, I can hear you just fine. Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, Mr. Reichert, we can give you 3 minutes or so to go ahead and present your comments if you'd like to, and also mute in the background. It seems like we have a little bit of double hearing going on for anyone else.
Yeah.
Mute.
I think it's a YouTube video.
Yeah.
Yeah, so anyone else mute, or unless you're talking, and so we don't hear the double talk.
Okay.
Or pause your other video. So Mr. Reichert, go ahead. Mr. Reichert, I can hear you just fine, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. Sale, thank you. I can hear you in double. I hear you in triple. I hear everybody in triple. So I've been trying to follow this.
Mr. Reichert, I don't know if you can close your YouTube window. I think that will help.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sally.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me without the double.
We can hear you just fine. Go ahead and proceed.
Echo.
It'll be good enough. It's clear enough.
All right. Well, thank you. I'm going to take just a few minutes. Let me just take a few minutes and make a couple of comments. I have been able. Close my YouTube window. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can, and please proceed. You know, we can hear you fine regardless.
Okay, thanks. I can't tell. I've closed my YouTube, so I can't tell. All right, thank you very much. And I'm just going to take a very few minutes. I have been able to follow this. I want to let you know that worked very closely with Alderman Arnett and the coalition on this. And I also want you to know that the idea of community benefit agreements was a primary recommendation of the Forest Drive Eastport Sector Study Task Force. I was the chairman of that task force, and a final report, by the way, was submitted copies to you all and to planning and zoning and other, and to city council back in March. So it's the March 17th final report of the task force. The task force, if you look at that report, if you need another copy, I'm happy to send it to you. On page 5 of that report is a very extensive discussion of the concept and recommendations that the task force made relative to the use of community benefit agreements. Relative specifically to this legislation, let me tell you at least what we thought to be the intent here. It was really as a follow-up to the initial required community meetings. As you know, since 2018, the community meetings are now required by the developer and members of the community to be conducted and essentially reported on prior to the submission of the application. Those meetings, from our own experience, are very general meetings. They are presentations by the developer to the community, and generally the general public can attend, and the comments are all over the place. Useful feedback, but not focused in many respects. The idea of the community benefit agreement is actually a second step. It's a little bit more formal, but not meant to be overly restrictive. The intent here is to have a sit-down conversation between a representative and diverse group of the community and the developers to review the plan development and to share ideas and to try to define potential benefits to the community from the developers and for the development. In other words, what benefit is this development going to be for the community? And this can get very specific. It can get to specific contributions, or it can be a shared intent to jointly move to improve certain circumstances. There's a second intent here, and that is not only to identify benefits, but as I heard Mr. Waldman say, you know, what about issues or consequences? Well, we would like to see issues included in this legislation as well as benefits. That's very important. And I'm going to give you 2 examples from history. Okay. If we can get a mechanism to sit down and have a little more in-depth conversation to explore potential benefits and issues. Issues could be such things as water access. It can be questions by the community as to whether or not a specific part of a development is compliant with code and an understanding of that. It is also a mechanism which allows developers to have access to community members to talk about very specific things in regard to their development, to clarify or to consider possible changes or improvements. And the whole idea here is to get that dialogue going with a group that is somewhat of a work group. It has to be diverse. It should be community representatives from business, from different perspectives in the community where the development is going to take place. One benefit of this is clarity. You can have clarity on 2 points, okay? One is you could have clarity on any agreement as to a benefit or an issue, just in terms of identifying what the benefit is and identifying what the issue is. So the developer and the community representatives are reading from the same sheet of music. Why this is important is because we have experienced time and time again situations where in the community, developers make presentations and members of the community claim that there were verbal representations of agreements on something to provide something, for example. And then years later, in some cases, there's a situation where, well, I remember you saying that, or I remember you agreeing to that, and the developer saying, well, that's not what I said, and that's not what I meant, and we didn't consider all the factors. That's what we're trying to prevent at an earlier stage. I'm not naive enough to think we can always prevent that, but I think there's great value in early, more detailed conversation that identifies benefits and issues, both from the developer's perspective and from the community perspective. My experience in this is that when people sit down and talk to each other, they can listen better and they come up with a better understanding to either make changes or modify recommendations or whatever they're going to do. The 30 days is from the time that the community meeting is convened. And the reason for that is to kind of jumpstart from that initial community meeting to this second step. And that 30-day requirement is on the alderperson. There was concern when we talked about this as to how many people should be on it. It's not in the legislation you're looking at, but if you read the task force report, it goes into great detail about things like that and some of the questions that you raised this evening. So I do recommend that you look at that. And you may find that you'd want to expand or more clarify some of the aspects of this legislation. And we'd be open to that, frankly. This is bare bones. It shouldn't go on forever. And we should eliminate any possibility that either the community or the developer would use this as some mechanism to just drag things on, okay? There's really, if you do this right, there's no real benefit, if you will, to either side doing that. We raised questions when we developed this idea about, well, is it enforceable? A lot of people wanted to know, well, if the developer and this community group come to agreement, is it enforceable? And we concluded in that discussion that we would not make this contractual. We would not set up that kind of specific written agreement, if you will. What we did suggest, that it's not in the legislation that you see here, is that in the report that's filed as part of the application, the regular community input to an application, are any mutual statements of intent. In other words, we thought that it was important that if the developer and the community group actually agreed to something that they wanted to convey, it would be important for them to acknowledge that jointly so that there's really no doubt about it. An example of that is and can be if a developer agrees with the community to provide public water access in some fashion, and that's an agreed intent, it is conveyed to Planning and Zoning and the Planning Commission that then as an intent. There's no dispute. And so this process can be used to clarify things in that regard. There are other aspects of this, which I'm not going to go into today, but I do encourage you to have more public comment about this legislation and to please read the task force report that you've received because it was a priority recommendation of the task force. And that was a, well, you know what the task force was on the sector study. So with that, thank you for the opportunity to address it this evening. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you for that 8 minutes of explanation that clarified for some what this was about, where the genesis was. Thank you. Any questions by the commissioners?
What if the applicant objects to the makeup of the committee?
Well, I mean, off the top of my head, I would say the makeup of the committee is determined by the alderperson. So, you know, we're not going to, I would not write into any formal legislation, what do you do if you don't like the makeup? As a practical matter, if you don't like the makeup or you think it's prejudicial in some fashion, or you have some other problem with it, you talk to the alderperson. But the obligation, well, it's not an the wording is may appoint, okay? But if the alderperson appoints, they have the responsibility for any consideration of objections to that, in my opinion.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for that clarity. Are there any other members of the public to present on this item today, staff? Thank you very much, Mr. Reichert. Okay, we can take him off of the open mic and we'll go back to the commissioners. We are currently in the open public hearing item of this. We have no other persons to present on the matter, and we'll leave it open for 2 weeks till our July 1st meeting where we can hear further comments from the public through submittals online, and then we will do our final deliberations and modification recommendations if there are any for this. Commissioners, any last minute, oh, by the ways with this before we just continue it on? Thank you very much, commissioners and everyone else participating on this item. We are going to now continue 019-21 to the July 1st meeting. I will stop the share and then go back to our agenda. And as you will see, that ends our public hearing items down at the bottom. And now we can go down to miscellany. So the public hearing item portion of this brief is closed. On to miscellany. Are there any miscellaneous items commissioners need to bring up or staff?
There's one thing, and I don't know if Jackie wants to talk about it or not, but for their next meeting, I had planned to bring an ordinance that Alderman Arnett has introduced on the administrative hearing officer, which proposes to change a lot of your duties and Board of Appeals duties so that instead of approving variances, special exceptions, plan developments, and major site designs at your level, it would be first approved by a hearing officer. And then if there was an appeal of that, that would go to the Board of Appeals. So your role would be more looking at comprehensive planning and legislation. You could also hold work sessions. So I think that
they would also still approve any major subdivision. That's not been changed. So any project involved a major subdivision, including a plan development, they would have to approve the subdivision for it.
So there would be, so that might be a long conversation. At the same time, we're going to bring, hopefully if it gets introduced in time, new legislation. Oh, no, sorry, that's not right. Okay, so we were also thinking though of time sensitivity is a work session on the Hillman Garage. We really want to get that in front of you because their schedule is very, very tight. And, you know, we just need to get them in front of you for a work session. So I'm not sure if we can do both of those at one meeting. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are you could definitely get the legislation introduced because introduction is usually shorter than final deliberations. It goes over a 2 meeting period. So I firmly believe you get the legislation in as well as a work session for our next meeting. But what else would you have on the next agenda?
There is a site design for a structure that's more than 3,250 square feet.
Yeah, you're talking a lot for one night, considering we have to continue this ordinance 019-21. So that would put the work session at the risk of having them show and nothing to do until 9 o'clock at night.
Right. Well, would it be possible to have the ordinance on and you would just open the public hearing but not do the staff presentation? Or should I just take it off altogether?
You have to do the staff presentation. And even though if it's a tumultuous item, I mean, I don't see it going beyond 40 minutes, 45 minutes. So.
I think what Sally is trying to say is that that we want to make sure we have the work session, and if you have the hearing, I mean, you could have people who want to come and testify on both those items too, because you know we don't know whether you will or not, so that's another factor to consider.
Is there any time pressure on the hearing officer legislation?
Well, only in that the legislation dies at the end of this term. So in October, that's the last city council meeting where they can adopt legislation, and then November, the election, all the legislation that's currently in the works dies. So that's the only time pressure on that. We still have time to get it through.
Well, then let's delay it. I mean, look, let's put that off to the next one and go ahead and get the work session done if that's a priority and we've got time. It makes total sense. It's only
Okay.
2 weeks. When we talk delaying here, we're not talking a month. We're only talking 2 weeks. And if something's gonna kill somebody's plan just because of 2 weeks, well, I mean, come on.
Right, it should be fine. I was just worried that we're hoping to have some legislation as a result of the maritime report. If that is introduced to city council soon, we would want that to come to you soon as well. So that's also a lot for one meeting, but we'll just try to work it out. We can postpone the hearing officer legislation.
I also shouldn't, for whatever it's worth, I may not be able to attend the entire July 1st meeting. If I come in at all, I'm going to be coming in late.
Okay.
Can we make sure then that we have a quorum?
I think you need to make sure that you have a quorum. And any comments I have on this legislation that we just heard, I'll reduce it to a public comment. And
How about what if we delayed the meeting 30 or 45 minutes? Would that ensure your ability to be there?
I don't know what's.
Okay.
Ben, we really can't do that because we've already posted the work session. We've already posted a sign for the work session that says the meeting begins at 7. But of the rest of you, which would be Ben, Diane, and David, you all three are going to be at the next meeting, correct?
Correct.
Yes, I think I indicated that in my email to you.
Planning on it.
I'm just double checking because I don't have that open right now.
Yep, I'm going to be there.
So
Also, if we do not have a quorum, we can still have the work session. So that's an option. We could move that to the front of the meeting, like we did for that Bay Village. So
But
Bob is late.
But you're saying that work session is of the utmost importance over the other items.
The Hillman Garage work session is the top priority.
And I don't think it's going to be that much of a problem for us, to be honest with you.
So what we can do, Ben, is that I will make sure that Alex is available for the next meeting, and then we can reformat the agenda so that we convene the meeting immediately, close the meeting, go into work session, and then when you finish the work session, we can open the public hearing items. It
sounds good, and based on if Bob's there or not, we can always amend that in the beginning. So that's
right. Okay.
Ben, would you
City
mind?
Council gave you a new member at the last meeting.
He hasn't been sworn in yet, but hopefully he will be sworn in soon. So Ben, then would you mind if I just left my ordinance on the agenda because I've advertised it, and that way I won't have to re-advertise it. And if we don't get into it, that's okay. It'll be the last thing on the agenda.
That's okay. As always, we can always continue the last items to the next meeting by choice. Yes.
Okay, maybe we'll be finished quicker than we think and we'll be able to get to it.
I actually think that's what's going to happen.
Okay. I'll be optimistic then.
All right. Thank you for that, Miss Laney. Any other questions regarding that? Or we can also follow up via email with Jackie tomorrow. All right. Work session on the agenda down there does not exist for today. That's just a holdover of admin error on our agenda items. So we are complete with the meeting. Is there any other item to bring up or reason not to move for adjournment? Anyone? Okay, I'll make a motion that we move for adjournment.
Second.
It's been motion second. Any debate? All those in favor say aye.
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 Bye.
Solid.